Board of Directors meeting for August 2023. And I think we have all directors here in person, yeah? Okay. Oh, we're not sure if Jack Tuttle is. He may come in late, we'll see. Yeah. And so at this point, Lori, why don't you kind of do the housekeeping bit?
Speak over, sorry, into this microphone over here.
Mhm.
Good afternoon, everyone. Before Chair calls this in-person online hybrid meeting to order, here's the housekeeping announcements. For those of you here at Jefferson Community Center, the microphones will be on throughout the very sensitive. Please try to speak one person at a time. The mics go silent when people talk over each other, and then online and phone participants cannot hear what is being said. When speaking, please identify yourself for the benefit of remote participants. There are no online board members participating today, so the votes can go like all in favor, say aye, and then nay or no,
Okay,
abstain.
okay.
Then I can record who voted which way. For community members participating in the public comment period, please know that we will be doing in-person comments first and then people online. And we don't go back and forth. So anyone participating online, please feel free to raise your hand early so that we don't miss you. And for in-person people commenting, please come up to the podium if you are able and speak into the microphone so we can pick up what you are saying. Online participants, click the raise hand buttons in the webinar controls, and phone participants press *9 to raise your hand. Public comment may be limited to 3 minutes. Chair, is that your discretion?
Yes, please.
Discretion. So 3 minutes is the limit for today. Emailed public comments have been received, and you have most of them that were received before noon today in front of you for the directors on the table over there. The emailed comments are to publiccomment@redwoodenergy.org, and online participants, if you experience disruptions during this meeting, please notify if you are able by calling or texting 707-291-4588, 291-4588, or by emailing publiccomment@redwoodenergy.org. That's all participation announcements.
All right. Thank you, Lori. And so I'd like to call this meeting to order. And like Lori said, we don't have any directors participating remotely, but we still need to do a roll call, right? Okay. Can we do that, please?
So Director Arroyo. Here. Director Bauer.
Here.
Director Jorgensen.
Here.
Director Mobley. Here. Director Sherry Provolt. Director Ramos.
Here.
Director Scafani from Blue Lake is absent. Vice Chair Schaefer. Here. Director Tuttle is absent. Director Wilson.
Here.
Chair Wu.
Here.
There is a quorum present.
Great. Thanks. All right. So I'm just going to start moving down the agenda here. And we've done the roll call. And next is reports from member entities. So is there any reports from directors? Up here. Okay, nothing on that. So let's move on to oral communications. This is the time where people may address the board or submit written communications on matters that are not on the agenda. And at the conclusion of this part of the oral communications, the board can respond to statements, but any request that requires action will be set for a future meeting on a future agenda. So at this point, is there any oral communications from the public that are things that are not on the agenda? It is. That's 8.1 and 8.2. Anything else? And how about online?
We do have one person that has raised their hand.
Okay.
Go ahead, number ending in 532.
Do we not?
Able to unmute 532?
Can we tell if they're talking and we just can't hear?
Enter *6 to unmute. Are you there? Right, I see that you're unmuted. Are you able to speak? I don't know. We could hear you. I'm gonna go to another public speaker and see if this works.
Okay,
Okay, Patty Harvey, are you able to unmute?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we
oh, good, phew.
Yeah, hi. I'm calling from Willow Creek and I've heard about this meeting. I've heard about the issue with purchasing renewable energy certificates from the biomass plant in Scotia. And I just wanted to comment that they emit more carbon than burning of coal, and their repeated violations of air and water pollution laws produce very dirty energy. And I urge the RCEA to not buy any renewable energy certificates from Scotia. That's all I need to say. Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks for clearing that up, Eileen, that we can actually hear people. So the tech part is done. And I'll remind folks that the biomass comments will be at items 8.1 and 8.2 on the agenda. And this is the part or communications for things that are not on the agenda. And so is there somebody else that
There is still number 532. I'm gonna ask them to unmute one more time.
give it a try?
Okay, number ending in 532, did you have a public comment? Okay, we're unable to get them through. Oh, hello?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I
Hey.
can hear you.
Hello?
We can hear you, go ahead.
Yeah, I noticed in this morning's paper, there was a letter to the editor. Had to do with a complaint that's been filed against you. Is there any truth that you folks discriminated against a veteran?
I am unaware of that, but we'll definitely look into that because that would be something that we would kind of have big frowns on. So
What was the lawsuit for?
I don't know, but maybe staff can figure,
No comment,
okay,
comment.
all right.
It's not a lawsuit, rather it's a complaint filed against you folks with the EECO.
I think we can't comment on that.
You get to comment at us and can't respond.
Okay. Any
There's no
other,
truth?
we really can't comment on that.
Public comment isn't
there
for
any
a back and forth conversation, so.
Is there any truth that a complaint has been
can't,
filed?
we really can't comment on that. So I think that if there's another thing that you'd like to ask the board, that would be great. But we can't comment on that one. Actually, we really can't. We can listen, but we can't really comment back.
All right, well, no, I had nothing else.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anything, anybody else online?
I don't see any other hands raised.
Okay, wait a minute, go ahead, Lori.
Written comments submitted from Ken Miller and Jesse Bell, both of them regarding residential rooftop solar. Favor of that, and those comments are available on the website.
Yeah. They're also at the tables as well. Thank you. All right, so I think that takes care of item 3, oral communications. So I'm gonna move on to item 4, consent calendar. All matters on the consent calendar are considered to be routine by the board and were usually enacted in one motion, but if there's any discussion from either the board or the public on any of these items, then we'll definitely pull those and consider them. So now I'm going to read through what the consent calendar is. And then I'll ask the board if they want to pull anything, and then I'll ask the public if they want to pull anything, and we'll do that. Item 4.1, approve minutes of July 27, 2023 board meeting. 4.2, approve the disbursements report. 4.3, accept financial reports. 4.4, approve the analyst job description that's provided in the packet. Add the analyst job description to the salary schedule, technician position classification. Classifying the rural Wren technician position to analyst. The revised org chart. That's all part of 4.4. 4.5 is authorize staff to prepare and release solicitations for rural Wren administrative, marketing, legal, and database support services following review and approval by our CEA administrative staff and our legal counsel. 4.6 is approve memorandum of understanding between RCEA and the County of Humboldt to investigate microgrid development at county airport facilities and authorize the executive director to execute said MOU, memorandum of understanding. So from the board, anybody want to pull an item to discuss? No? Okay, not hearing it from the board, and now I'll take it out to the public. First in person, is there anybody in person who'd like to pull any of these items? Not seeing any, and how about online?
I am not seeing any hands raised.
Okay, so with that, I'll entertain a motion to accept the consent calendar.
So moved. Second.
Okay, so all in favor can raise your hand. Yeah,
Aye.
and Lori's getting it.
Yep.
Okay, any nays? Any abstain? Okay,
Motion passes.
thank you. Okay, new business fiscal year 2022-23, our fourth quarter budget report.
Yeah, I'm going to hand it over to Lori Biondini to just quickly go through what's in the staff report, which is basically things sort of laid it about where we thought they would.
Yeah, I think that that's the basic takeaway, is that things landed where we thought they would. We netted about 600,000 less than we expected to, but overall, that's a small amount compared to what we thought we would, which was a little over 16 million. And so I did prepare one slide. I don't know if it got into the packet, just because it's kind of an uneventful staff report. I thought we could also, though, just look at where we thought we would be in June of last year. So we thought we would be making 39 million more than we did in 2021. And our costs up 29 million. And this is just looking at overall revenue and expense and what we would net. But of course, this is driven mostly by energy revenue and energy expenses. And then in December, we decided to do a mid-year adjustment and changed it to reduced our expected revenue down by 15 million and reduced our expected expenses and costs by 23.6 million, which increased our net. And we ended up pretty close, but we were about 5 million off on both revenue and expense side. And just like as a reminder to how volatile the energy market is and how we are, I think, good to revisit basically these things mid-year. And also a reminder that rate changes often happen because we follow PG&E rate changes in January. And so we're on a fiscal year, but revenue kind of comes out really in the middle of that fiscal year. And then, the Energy Authority, our consultant, updates the financial modeling daily. And so depending on what day we pick and, what the energy market is doing, what the weather is doing, what natural disasters are doing, it can change very greatly day to day. So just as an example of it's good to revisit mid-year and kind of try to true things up. I think that's all I had. Does anybody have any questions?
Any questions from up here? I don't have any, but we'll take it out to the public next. So how about public in the room? We're on item 6.1. Seeing any, and how about out online?
I don't see any hands raised online.
Okay, so the action is to accept the quarterly budget report. Does that need a motion or anything? Yeah, okay,
I'll make a motion to accept the quarterly budget report. I will second.
okay. All in favor, raise your hand, please.
Aye.
Okay, and are there any nays? Any abstains? Okay. Good, thank you. So now we're moving on to CCE business, and we do have a quorum, correct? Okay. So item 7 is 7.1 actually, net billing tariff implementation update. And this is an action item, and it's very confusing. So I think we need a staff report.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Richard Engel, Director of Power Resources, and I'll see if I can try and help address the confusing nature of this item. My apologies for attending remotely. I had a household COVID exposure this week. For topics, I'm just going to give an overview of the net billing tariff. As always, we apologize for having too many acronyms, but this one will become familiar. And we'll provide some value and cost analysis on this and describe some options that staff looked at in our recommendation, and then take any questions from you. The acronym you're probably already familiar with that's been around for many years is NEM, or Net Energy Metering. And that reflects a system that's been around for a while that credits customers for their net monthly excess usage on their solar generation system or other type of renewable generation system that's behind the customer meter, and sends some of that power out to the grid. The net billing tariff is a new set of rules and a new billing system that's being introduced this year. It comes out of a decision from the Public Utilities Commission last year. And it becomes applicable to new systems that came online after mid-April of this year, although the actual billing for it is not going to go into effect with PG&E until December of this year. So people who got solar systems installed after April are currently being billed as NEM customers, but will transfer over to the net billing tariff once that's live with PG&E. One other nomenclature thing to be aware of is that net billing tariff is what the CPUC calls this, but PG&E is publicly marketing it as the somewhat more user-friendly name Solar Billing Plan. Next, please. So I won't belabor the details of the PUC decision. You'll sometimes hear people call it NEM 3 or Net Energy Metering version 3, but the CPUC themselves have kind of tried to shoo people away from that terminology since it's not really descriptive of what this is. And I'll get into some of these other details in slides yet to come, so we can move on to the next slide. So this is the third stage in an evolution of how renewable energy in behind the meter rooftop systems has been dealt with in California. What's popularly known as NEM 1.0 was in effect from the mid-90s until 2017. The policy has evolved as the problem we're trying to solve has evolved. So back in those early days, at the beginning, practically nobody had rooftop solar. Just the systems for being able to feed it into the grid were just coming into existence at that time. And the state really wanted to encourage people to adopt solar. And so they created very generous incentives as more solar started being added, concerns started to be raised about the design of that system. It was you know, as more and more solar came online, we were starting to see a glut of midday energy on the grid, and you know, a steep ramp for demand after the sun went down when people came home and household loads increased. And I think you've probably all heard about the duck curve. That's the graph that illustrates how that happened. There were also concerns about just fairness in that people who were able to put solar on their roofs were typically more affluent people, and they were getting this really good deal from the utility that was, you know, arguably on the backs of less affluent utility customers who were, you know, having to pick up some of that expense that was, you know, being laid out to compensate these solar customers for putting in the rooftop system. So NEM 2.0 that came out in 2017 made some changes to address that. One of them requiring new solar customers to be on a time of use rate and being subject to payments of some non-bypassable charges that everyone needs to contribute to kind of just maintain the grid. This newer system is further reform and really trying to maintain growth of solar energy, but allocate the costs and revenues in a way that's deemed appropriate by the state. Next slide, please. This table goes into some detail about some of the differences between what we've been on for the last several years, NEM 2.0, and the new net billing tariff. This is specific to residential customers here. The rates schedule that the new customers were required to be on under NEM 2.0 were time of use rates. The ELEC rate that's for net billing tariff customers adds on some partial peak rates on the shoulders sides of the 4 to 9 p.m. peak rates. This table goes into some of the other comparative differences between these. Some of these I'll dive into in a little more detail in the tables that follow, or in the slides that follow. You can go to the next slide. We can go to the next slide, please. So we're focusing on residential customers in this presentation discussion. That's partly because residential customers make up 95% of the existing solar customers in our CEA's service area. They're more vulnerable to the changes that are happening in the transition to net billing tariff because they typically have less of their load occurring during the daytime hours than commercial customers. So they stand to lose more by how net billing tariff reduces compensation for exporting power to the grid. New residential solar customers need to be on this ELEC tariff, which is different than the existing residential rates, whereas the new commercial solar customers will still have choices more similar to what they've had under NEM. So this table here just compares for an average RCA residential solar customer. Looking at their data, we see that in summer, a customer with solar will typically be a net generator, meaning in a summer month, they're going to put more energy into the grid than they take out. And in the winter months, they're going to be a net user. And how this plays out under NEM is you would expect to see a net credit on the bill in the summer and a net charge in the winter. With the net billing tariff, you'll still see some charge in the summer. And the reason for that is because the amount that customers get credited or charged, the amount they get credited for net export that they put into the grid varies hour by hour. And we'll look in a couple of slides at how that's distributed. So the customer winds up with a little bit lower bill in the winter under the net billing tariff, but paying more in the summer months. So it's a little more evened out over the year in comparison to how things have worked under NEM. Next slide, please. So this kind of illustrates the mismatch between when solar is putting energy into the grid, which is that dotted red line, and the hourly cost of getting energy for the grid. And you can see there's different components that make up those costs, and the costs tend to spike really strongly in the evening hours. And you see the yellow part of the bar is the generation capacity, which is what RCEA has to procure on behalf of our customers for when they're not generating their own energy. This is kind of a look at what it's costing on the wholesale side for a load serving entity like RCEA to meet customer energy needs. Let's look at the next slide. So looking at it month by month, this is showing the blue bars are for each month of the year with a typical residential solar customer, how many kilowatt hours they're using per month, and the solar generation is how much they're generating. So you can see that in the summer months that they're putting more energy into the grid than what they need to cover their own usage, but in the winter months, they're a net consumer. They have to get some of that power from the grid. Next slide, please. So this is, I know, a lot of detail, but just to give you a high level kind of take on it, this table shows across the top is each month of the year, and down the side is each of the 24 hours a day. And what it's showing us, it's a heat map showing the red is when the value of energy exported to the grid is lowest, and the green is when it's highest. So let's go one more slide ahead. And so what we see here is that midday in the spring months is when electricity fed to the grid has the lowest value. That's because solar is overproducing region-wide and the air conditioning loads of the summer haven't hit yet. So you tend to have supply really exceeding demand. And so the grid just doesn't really need more electricity. These numbers are what we get out of this thing called the avoided cost calculator. That's just telling us like what that value of avoided cost is of energy at each hour in each month of the year. Down on the lower right, you can see during an early evening in September, this is when power fed into the grid has the highest value because the sun is going down or has gone down and air conditioning loads are still high. That's when the grid could really use more electricity. Solar tends to produce a lot during the times when it's at lower value. And so just putting more and more solar systems on the grid without some way of balancing out that power, like energy storage systems, doesn't really help meet our grid-wide needs. And so under this net billing tariff, a component of what a customer gets paid for their energy exported to the grid is based on this table here. So during each hour of the day, it's going to have a different value. So it's a lot more granular than the time of use rates that are currently in use that compensate a customer. And it's right now, it's just kind of spinning under NEM, it's spinning the meter forward or backward. And if the customer is putting power into the grid, they're getting paid the same retail rate that they pay when they're pulling energy from the grid. Under this new system, they'll pay the retail rate when they need energy from the grid. And when they're putting excess into the grid, they'll get paid this avoided cost rate, which most of the time is lower than retail rates, but in a few hours of the year, as you can see, is actually substantially higher. These are the units here are dollars per kilowatt hour. Next slide, please. So here's a comparison of the economics for a residential system under the legacy NEM system and under the net billing tariff. And I think I haven't mentioned it yet, but want to be careful to emphasize that the net billing tariff only applies to new systems coming online, and that folks who already have a system that came online under NEM will continue to receive that NEM tariff for a 20-year period from when their system first came online. So this is the NEM still is going to apply to the great majority of the customers that we currently have with solar in Humboldt County. So looking at same-sized systems, you can see that the lifetime savings under the NEM is substantially higher. So you wind up with a payback period that's roughly twice as long under the net billing tariff with the assumptions that were used in this calculation. Next slide, please. So the net billing tariff, because it's trying to, create a system where people are going to put energy into the grid at times when it's most valuable, or avoid taking power off the grid at the times when it's most expensive, is really going to nudge people towards putting in batteries if they're going to put in solar, because then that lets you avoid buying energy from the grid during the times when it's most expensive, or potentially feed it into the grid. So this table just compares a system with a battery to one without it. And the percent of energy use that's offset, even the solar system is the same size in both instances here. There are some efficiency losses in charging and discharging a battery. So that's why a same size system won't offset as much of the usage as a system without a battery. You have a higher cost on the system with the battery, but you do get higher bill savings, and your exports to the grid are substantially smaller because the battery lets you save energy during those hours when it's generated in the middle of the day, and then use it to meet your own loads in the evening, so you don't get penalized by getting that fairly low export rate for energy put into the grid in the middle of the day. Next slide, please. So this isn't very conclusive, because the 2023 bar here is only a partial year, of course, but the idea is to just see how fast new solar projects have been coming online in Humboldt County historically. And what we've heard anecdotally, locally, and seen some data to support this statewide, is that there was a big surge in new solar systems getting sold in the months leading up to that April cutoff, when customers, like kind of the last call to get in on NEM for the 20-year legacy period. And then there appears to have been a really big drop off in sales of new solar systems now that customers and people selling solar systems to them know that their eligibility is going to put them under net billing tariff instead of under NEM. Next slide, please. So what can customers do to keep their solar value high under this new tariff that's being applied by PG&E? Basically seek to export less electricity to the grid. So currently about 50% of residential daytime solar electricity gets exported, and the other half gets used on site for daytime loads. With the net billing tariff, it's going to discourage you from exporting when those rates are close to zero during the middle of the day, encourage you to export in the evening hours when you get much better pricing, especially in September. It will also nudge people towards installing smaller solar systems. It really looks like your economics work out better if you install a system at or below 100% of your load, instead of oversizing a system with the expectation of making some money from energy exports. And again, of course, putting in storage to be able to shift your energy around during the hours of the day. Next, please. So now let's go to the next slide. And here are some considerations that we had in mind as we looked at different options. One is there's just a lot of unknowns still. These changes to rates are still in the process of being implemented by PG&E. And there's been this decline in new solar customer participation. So it's kind of hard for us to do kind of forecasts at the scale of all of RCEA about what the financial outcomes are going to be on this and how it's going to affect customer equity. The generation component of the net billing tariff is a smaller percentage of the decrease in value compared to NEM. Most of that decrease is happening on the delivery side, which is what PG&E bills customers for. Solar customers remain still a pretty small portion of RCA's residential customers. I've heard of at least one community choice energy program where about a quarter of all their customers are on solar. For us, it's still down in the single digits. In the past year, we've been adding about 40 new NEM accounts per month, but there is, as I say, an apparent decrease in new customer sales. And again, you know, the customers that we currently have are going to stay on that NEM tariff for 20 years from their install date. Next slide, please. So what we considered were options of mirroring PG&E in transitioning to the net billing tariff. So having consistency between us and PG&E in what that transition looks like. We also looked at just maintaining the status quo, continuing to give customers the NEM 2.0 tariff. But we do recognize some of these issues that have been brought up at the state level that triggered the CPUC to make this change, you know, are valid concerns about cost shifting among customer classes. And then we looked at adopting the net billing tariff, but doing some customization of the components of it to help low-income customers, to encourage storage more. Our options for doing that are somewhat limited by the ability of Calpine, the company that provides our billing services. They have a bunch of CCA clients, and it's kind of challenging for them to do a version of this that's totally customized to each of their clients. So there are some limitations there. So where we came down on this is we think for kind of a consistent customer experience and to not confuse customers, we think it probably makes sense in the short term for the board to adopt a net billing tariff that goes along with what PG&E is doing. From what we're hearing, the majority of the other community choice energy programs in PG&E service territory are taking this approach. And we propose that staff can reevaluate this in 1 to 2 years after we have some data on how it's played out to get a more realistic assessment of impact on our customers. We do have concerns about departing too much from what PG&E is doing. We find that one effect of that is that solar installers are really challenged to give customers accurate financial projections. That might sound kind of trivial, but it's really been our own experience and what we've heard from other community choice programs. It bears that out, you know, that some solar companies have just advised their customers to opt out of community choice energy because they can't figure out how to analyze the customer's financial pro formas when they're in the process of selling them a system because they're not understanding the rates. And I think the more that our rate design differs from PG&E's, the more we're going to be challenged by that. So, you know, we certainly can be proactive and reach out and try to educate the solar installers on our rates. And I think we can do that in the future. But I think in this initial phase, it probably makes more sense to go along with PG&E's transitional plan for net billing tariff. With that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Hey, thank you, Richard. I think I understand it a little bit more now. I probably couldn't explain it back to you, but I feel like I have a better understanding now. So first I'll take questions and stuff from the board and then we'll go out to the public. So anybody up? Go ahead, Sarah.
I was going to ask, are there any mechanisms in the future or in the past to incentivize storage for our CEA customers? And have we ever offered rebates, or would that be something that could be possible in the future? Or is it just so expensive that rebate wouldn't make much of a difference? Or what's that look like?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Richard.
Oh, okay. No, you can go ahead, Matthew. It sounded like you were ready to respond on that.
I was going to say, we have not directly offered storage rebates because there's been a really, really good state storage rebate. And so there's been like millions and millions of dollars of storage incentives. And that's because they had a program that, so there's sort of across the board rebates, but they also had what they were calling like equity and resilience rebates. And so that was if you had 2 public safety power shutoffs, which everyone in Humboldt County qualified for that. And then other certain factors, like if you're a medical baseline customer or if you relied on a well for your water. And so there was kind of these other factors that could basically get you close to a free battery, also for commercial facilities. So for critical facilities and many facilities now have a big Tesla battery. Eureka City Hall has one. I know Fortuna has a couple, I think. And so that rebate program was it was like already a free battery for kind of critical facilities. And so we've mostly focused on promoting that to customers, but that's not to say that we couldn't have other programs. And one of the things that the state has been talking about is having for like low income customers or others sort of with this transition battery incentives to support, kind of using an incentive to kind of level the playing field on the battery piece of it to help with that kind of transition to the new system.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Nellie.
I have a storage question as well, and I also had that question, so thank you for asking it. I think it sort of demonstrates my ignorance about how the grid ultimately functions, but I'll still ask it. Is there an opportunity for us to develop local storage where we are able to, in essence, acquire that excess power and store it from people that are generating at their homes? Is that even something that would be?
Good question.
Good idea.
And so the short answer is sort of like not exactly. And so in the case of this, we don't control the PG&E part of the bill. And so they're just saying, hey, there's the transmission distribution costs.
Yeah.
And so, that said, as we're looking at like towards the overall big picture of like getting off of fossil fuels, having like larger scale storage, the solar and the storage don't have to be connected to one another to be effective. And so like the battery storage project that we have the contract for out at the old Fairhaven biomass plant, that's like a 17.25 megawatt. That's like a city of Arcata size battery. Like you could power the entire city of Arcata for like 4 hours or something like that. And so, as we're looking at like, well, we've got all these solar customers, those, battery systems can help balance overall. And so from a reliability standpoint, it does matter. We don't see like, the customer side systems are just sort of changes the shape of the load that we have to buy. So it's like, if we look at when we're buying power, we've got sort of a morning peak and an evening peak, and there's this dip in the middle of the day. And that's because people have solar on their roofs, and our dip is a little bit less severe than everyone else. So, we can use storage to help kind of balance that out at a countywide level.
Yeah.
It's not like there's not a system to like necessarily like aggregate solar customers' load and like, game the system outside of, their actual individual bills.
May I add on to that, which is another thing? Thank you for helping me understand that. I did get to see SMUD, Sacramento Municipal District, talk about their approach, which I'm sure is shared by other entities, but of kind of looking at everything that has a battery as like one giant battery, like vehicles that are charging that aren't being used or are fully charged and are not being used. Everything that has like that capacity for storage is one massive network. That sounds very exciting and sci-fi-ish, but also very, something to aim for in the future. So how does solar fit into that kind of thinking about having, interconnectivity between all of the different forms of storage within our like larger energy network?
Yeah. So the program that we have with Swell basically lets us do that on the storage side. So, the solar panel on its own is just going to produce when the sun's out and to do its thing. But to the point of being able to aggregate all those distributed systems so that they're not just kind of doing their own thing, that program basically allows us to provide an incentive to customers, and they can sign up and say, okay, then that's going to let are, to align those systems with when they're needed, so I was just talking with another CCA down in East Bay. They have a similar program that's been, they're bigger than us, so they've got a little bit more data to work with as far as kind of results. And what they were seeing is like when storage systems are just left to their own devices, they kind of do all sorts of different things. Some people are focused on offsetting their usage, so they kind of program it to do that. Some people just look at their rates, and so they just dump as much as they can as soon as the rates, like the time of use rates hit. And so their batteries have already discharged when the power is actually most needed. Sort of like they do it too early in the evening because the time of use rates are not very granular. So it's like power rates go high like 4 o'clock, but really, well, it'd be nice if that was at 8 o'clock when the battery discharged, not just right at 4 when somebody said, all right, here's when my rates go up, discharge the battery. And so what they've seen is, by basically contracting with all those distributed systems and, like the program that we have, saying, hey, we want them to actually deploy in that peaky part that Richard showed in the graph, which is a pretty big spike. It's pretty narrow. They're able to get much better results than what, systems just kind of would be the customer's kind of choice to do. And so, that might be a little more challenging with the new PG&E rate structure because people are going to be more focused on how to kind of, minimize their own bill. So they might be less willing to sign up for something that's sort of broader grid benefits, even if there's an incentive with that. So I think that's going to kind of have to come out, as Richard said, once the actual rates are established and people can actually know what the numbers are. Because right now it's kind of conceptual numbers, but there's no like, PG&E hasn't put out the rate sheets yet, so we don't really know what it's going to look like. But so bottom line is we have a program that allows people to sign up if they want to participate, and they get an incentive for that, to do that kind of thing.
I guess.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
So for the group, I have a 20 kW solar system with a 20 kW battery. It's an in-phase system. With those systems, you can pick a PG&E rate schedule with the system. And I have, it looks like the ETOUD NIM2, which is, it offloads the battery between 4 and 9 to take care of that sort of problem. And from my experience, it's not like I have a large bill. It's pretty small, but I don't get it's not a ton of credit either. It's kind of a wash using that system. And I think from what my past PG&E usage was, because I got a pretty high user, it's actually a pretty good deal for the customer. And, I look at it and, that we talk about cost shifting for low income people or people who have a hard time being able to purchase it. But there's also some financial strain when you double or triple the payback period with the NBT system. So I don't really buy that argument too much. I think the best of both worlds is NEM2 with some rate linking. I don't know how we do that. I can tell you that knowing what I know now, if I was approached to try to, or thinking about doing an NBT system, I probably wouldn't do it because the payback's so long.
And just to add to that, a couple thoughts. We don't have control over the PG&E part of it. And then the CPUC ultimately decided to go this route. And so, their arguments are what they are. And as Richard mentioned, our part of the bill is sort of like the smaller piece of the overall picture. So, our ability to change the outcome is more limited. But that said, the board still can set rates even if we follow the same structure. And so, to Richard's point of it's already pretty complicated. And then if we say, well, we're going to do something different and then try to figure out, how a solar installer is going to like explain, well, RCA's part is going to be structured this way and PG&E's is that. And if it gets pretty difficult it's already difficult to explain, the new system, but that doesn't mean that the board can't set our part of the bill's rates to, be just like we have right now. And, NEM is like, okay, well, PG&E gives you an offset, we give you an offset plus a kicker, and so the board can still incentivize solar and provide a benefit even if we sort of change the rate design to align with what PG&E is doing. Yeah, you all could say, well, we just want to, do whatever that looks like plus X percent or whatever number. So the board will still have freedom to set the actual rate that we're paying out or charging.
Sherry, may I?
Wait a minute, see if somebody else does and then I'll come back to you, okay?
Okay.
Anybody else on the board? Questions? Okay, go ahead, Nellie.
So, and this is I'm kind of looking at Matthew, but it might be Matthew or Richard or someone else. So my original question, I don't feel like I fully understood why we can't be a purchaser of like excess solar energy and store it in a battery system that we developed.
So we can pay people for the solar they produce.
Okay.
And we can also have a battery that overall balances our load. It's just not like there's no direct line between the two. So, unless the system's actually on their site. So, you can have a customer sited system that's actually preventing the power from going onto the grid. But once it goes onto the grid, PG&E is going to charge the rates for their part of the bill that they're going to charge. And so from the customer standpoint, once it's going onto the grid, they're going to get the PG&E part of the bill that PG&E has determined. We can say, hey, if you put power onto the grid, we want to pay you, the same rate as PG&E plus 20% or whatever it is, plus 10%. And then we can also have a battery system that, is balancing loads at the county level, but it would have to be behind the customer's meter to have it not impact the customer as far as the PG&E part of the bill, which is the larger part.
But to incentivize storage and to increase that or decrease the upfront cost, an option that it sounds like would be more viable would be potentially something like offering a rebate rather than buying it at a higher cost over time. Is that accurate?
Yeah. So I think one of Richard's slides showed that if you have storage, you get a lot more bang for your buck as far as your bill payment. You have to buy the storage, and so if you give an incentive for the storage system, then you're kind of taking that cost piece out of it, reducing the cost piece, and so you get the payback period.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question then. So if we did something like that, would that be a better way to approach it rather than what one of the other alternatives was, which is just for our CEA to go, no, we're just going to pretend that NBT isn't a thing and we're going to just keep doing our NEM 2.0. I mean, did we cost out if we did that NEM 2.0, what that would mean for us?
So we haven't been able to directly cost that out because we don't know what PG&E's actual rates are going to be and how they'll compare. And so that's where it's a little problematic at this point because they're still trying to figure out how to roll it out. And so I think that's where Richard was saying we should revisit this once it's actually in place. And again, even if we stuck with our piece of it as NEM 2.0, the majority of the bill is going to be switched over for new customers to PG&E's structure. And so I think the feeling was that it's going to be doubly complex for new people thinking about going solar to try to figure out, well, PG&E structures this and ours is that. And it would be better for us just to say, well, they're the same structures. We're just providing a different benefit as far as the dollar amount that we're incentivizing. So that rather than changing the shape of what we're doing, but we could go back, if we look at it and say, this just doesn't, we'd rather stick with the old way.
Yeah, go ahead.
With the NBT scenario, is there still a solar true-up charge from PG&E?
I think so. Richard, do you know off the top of your head the specific? Because that's one of the things that there was going to be a fixed charge that actually got taken out of it after there was much pushback because it was sort of arbitrary.
I think I get most of questions from people in the community about solar true-up.
So right now, PG&E does handle a yearly true-up. RCE is monthly. And with this system, PG&E is going to now do monthly billing to their customers, the NBT customers. but there will be an annual true up with the excess, and that's where the net surplus compensation comes in. They've got a kind of a adder that they literally and we do overall annually, not just monthly, had excess, they'll pay you a little bit more, and that's their annual true up is what they're calling for.
And that's Sally Regular, account services manager, whose name is on the staff report. So that's why she knows the answer to that.
Okay, yeah, go ahead, Frank.
So RCEA currently gives back, I think it's 1 cent per kilowatt. Are they going to continue to do that?
Well, so that's totally up to the board. So yeah, right now, we basically, if people over generate or produce more than they use, we give them, the value of that plus a cent. So it's better, PG&E just gives you, the flat amount. And so we could still maintain that, additional, it's about 10% right now. So that would be up to the board to keep that.
So you give them the 1 cent is over what they
over the rate. So they get the retail rate plus a penny. So it's
plus a penny.
Pretty good. I mean, it's much more than we pay for like wholesale size solar array power, produced by facilities, because it's the full retail generation rate plus a penny.
So that, like, again, you said we have to decide that here today.
You don't have to decide that today. So this is more just deciding if we're going to start, because it's going to take a while for Calpine to start rolling out the new billing system. And so they're like, hey, if you want this to be in place by the end of the year when PG&E is switching over, they have to start working on it now. And so they're asking people to kind of decide which way they want to go. But actually setting the rates will be a second step.
Okay. So perhaps one of the things that we could do if we went with this is, and I hear you about, letting the state, that we have let the state cover the storage funding or, grants, but maybe we can do something like that. I mean, that's what RCA was about, we always called it the customer programs. So maybe that's something we could do to take the sting off of this.
Yeah.
Anybody else from up here? All righty, I'll take it out to the public. This is item 7.1 net billing tariff implementation update. Anybody in the room? Yes, please come on up if you don't mind. Thanks.
Thanks. I'm Diane Larson from Arcata, one of those weird solar customers who put solar on my main unit prior to 2014. It was really early. And then I put solar on an ADU, a separate that we have with the second process. And then I have a place in St. Helena and I put solar on and beat the April 14th. So I'm in EM2. So that's where I am. But I want you to know that I was a single mom and a teacher, so I'm not wealthy. Those of you who are teachers know that we don't make a lot of money. And when I first was on, there was no distribution charge. And what I note now is the distribution charge in St. Helena is what the old distribution charge used to be here, which was close to $10 a month. And now my distribution charge here is over $12 a month. So this is a PG&E charge. And I would just like to remind you, I lived in Sacramento for years. So SMUD is a publicly owned utility. And that's the difference because PG&E is investor owned. They're in business to make profit. And all of this complexity that you have to struggle with and we have to struggle with is due to their incentivizing their own benefit. They don't want us to get off of gas. They make a lot of money on gas. My house is totally electrified. And they want to cut solar down so that they don't have to deal with that loss either. And when we look at what is happening to us climate-wise, this is in completely the opposite direction. So I would be willing to do whatever I can to get rid of PG&E and have a publicly owned utility here in our area. I know that in their last bankruptcy thing that they went through, they got the CPUC in the state to give them rules that make it harder for us to set up our own publicly owned utility. But if we work hard enough and we're consistent long enough, maybe we can get out from under this investor-owned, profit-making situation. So thanks for letting me address you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else from the public in the room? Okey dokey. I'll take it out to online public now.
I don't see any hands raised.
Okay. Oh, go ahead, Lori.
One comment received from Colin Fisk, requesting that RCEA retain its existing NEM program available on the list.
Thank you. Thanks, Lori. All right. Well, I'll bring it back up to the directors now, and there is a action item here that we need to decide what we want to do. Want to go first?
I would make this motion with the stipulation that, which was talked about by Richard, that we do reevaluate that once we have some more data on how that rate structure is affecting our ratepayers, and, you know, make some decisions on how to incentivize other things with that. So.
And like I said, before it rolls out, we'll have to come back with actual rate setting for you
Okay, yeah.
to evaluate. So.
And at that time, you will discuss whether or not you're going to give back to.
Yep.
Yep. Okay, I agree with Sarah.
I'm interested,
Go ahead.
I'm interested in seeing that come back alongside incentive-based program for incentivizing battery storage. And I get the equity issue. And I just want to note that, you know, yeah, these are expensive systems to set up, and by providing a rebate on a portion of it or some kind of incentive to encourage storage, that does favor those who already have the financial means to install those systems in the first place. But the other side of that coin is that people who have the financial ability to make those choices and are doing an ecologically and socially important thing that's sort of a collective effort, you know, are kind of taking it upon themselves to move the needle in the direction of something more sustainable. So I also want to appreciate that and find a way to support that. And I know there's a lot of people who want to do that and are kind of right on the brink of being able to afford it. Certainly a lot of folks in my community that I've talked to, and I think a small incentive like that could make a big difference. And I'm more interested in incentivizing the storage than I am like making a commitment to a long-term higher rate, or I'd like to just compare the costs of those two things. So I'm in favor of that if we could bring back that option at the same time.
Yeah. I like that motion. Yes.
Go ahead, Scott.
And I'd like to, not this is a friendly amendment or anything like that, but that we bring this back in 12 months, not 24. I don't want to see us wait 2 years to revisit this.
I don't think anyone actually made a motion, but was it sort of a motion?
I thought I would be amenable to this motion if we added that stipulation. So after, I guess, hearing all these things that we also want to see as pieces of it, I'll move to approve the net billing tariff that mirrors PG&E's billing tariff.
But you're going to modify it also, right?
To be implemented, you know, with the stipulations that were just stated that I saw Matthew write all of them down. So they know how we feel about it.
Storage and the bring it back in 12
months. Yeah.
Okay. Everybody clear on what the motion is?
No, I'm not.
Why don't you read out the motion? Could you read out?
Well, I said bring it back, and then Scott said bring it back in 12 months. So he just made it more specific.
But I think there's a clarifying that we're going to be coming back for actual rate setting before it rolls out. And then we'll reevaluate it, you know, no later than 12 months. And then we'll also bring back a look at what a storage incentive could sort of compare or how that could be part of the plan.
Perfect.
Okay.
I knew you wrote it down. Yeah.
Second that.
Okay, great. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, raise your hand.
Aye.
Oh, wait, I don't vote.
Oh. What?
Because we're in, water district and tribes are
Thank you.
excluded.
So would you please keep your hands up then?
Could you restate the motion? I guess I got lost again.
Go ahead, Matthew. Can you restate it?
Yeah, let me try. So approve a net billing tariff design that mirrors PG&E's net billing tariff to be implemented on or after December 15th, 2023, as determined by Calpine's billing readiness. Prior to that, so semicolon, prior to that implementation, we'll be bringing back, Apple bring back proposals for adoption, and along with storage incentive options, and we'll reevaluate the net billing tariff structure no later than 12 months
After implementation.
Thank you.
Good.
Right. Where were we? Did we have?
Colin, I think
That was
maybe the vote.
not seconded it.
Okay, so do we have a, on favor, raise your hand? Okay.
And please.
You don't vote.
And I don't vote. Dang it. I want to vote. I really want to vote.
This is Jorgensen. Director Wilson, are you in favor of are you voting yes or no?
Are you talking to me?
Yes.
I'm not sure what you asked me now.
So this is the vote, and Chair was asking for ayes. Are you voting yes?
I voted aye.
Okay, so please
Okay.
keep your hands up.
Hands up.
Thank you. Director Wilson.
It's all eyes.
All ayes.
Only because I couldn't vote.
Yes. All in favor?
Oh, no nos.
No, thank you.
Okay. No nays and no abstains.
We do care about our members who don't vote on the CC.
And you guys ask good questions and provide good feedback, even though you don't.
Are you just you're not voting because you're not a CC, is that?
Correct. Yeah. All right, let's move on to new CCE business. This is item 8.1, procurement of content category 3, renewable energy certificates. CC3 RECs.
And Richard's gonna lead on the next two, but I just wanted to highlight that we broke this into specifically two different pieces, because the first question is, do we want to do this at all as far as a way to sort of manage our compliance costs? And then the second question of, if we are going to use category 3 renewable certificates, do we want to buy them potentially from Humboldt Sawmill Company? And so that's why it's sort of split into more the policy of using this as a compliance tool. And then the second question, which I think is why most of the public is here.
All right, thank you. Was it you or?
Richard, I think.
Okay.
Great. Thank you, Matthew, for queuing that up. I don't have a slide deck for this one, but I just wanted to give a little bit of background. The renewable portfolio standard in California requires load serving entities like RCEA to procure certain minimum amounts of renewable energy, and that ramps up over time towards the state's goals. And the units that we buy the renewable energy in are called RECs, or renewable energy certificates. And each one of those is equivalent to a megawatt hour of electricity, the units that we buy the electricity in. And there are three categories of these RECs that are of interest here. So historically, we've been buying the RECs as category 1 or category 2 RECs. In simplest terms, the category 1 RECs are usually ones that are from in-state sources, or something that can be basically brought into the state through strict chain of custody requirements. The RECs that come from our own airport microgrid are an example of these product category 1 RECs. The category 2 RECs typically are ones that come from out of state. So since the inception of our program, we have bought some of our energy in the form of wind energy from the Pacific Northwest, and that's that category 2 RECs. There is an error in the second bullet in the staff report. The last sentence should say no more than 25% of an LSE's RPS requirement can be met with PCC2 RECs. Sorry that said PCC3. And then the third category are what are called unbundled RECs, these category 3 RECs. And this is where the energy certificates can be sold totally separately to a different buyer than the energy underlying the certificates. That unbundling just kind of lowers the value of these RECs. And so the state standard is you can't get more than 10% of your requirement for meeting state goals with these product category 3 RECs. Up until now, we've avoided buying those category 3 RECs. It just under the circumstances we find ourselves in now, we need to ask the board to reconsider our approach on that. We haven't at any time, had a policy of not buying them. It's just been sort of practice of staff to pursue these kind of higher quality category 1 and 2 RECs. But one thing that's going on right now is that we're having a major delay in the Sandrini solar project. We've talked with the board about this at several past meetings. And it's looking like that delay could be well into 2024, even late into the year. We're in a compliance period right now for the renewable portfolio standard that began in 2021 and ends at the end of 2024. When we were doing our portfolio planning, we were expecting to get the great majority of our needed renewable energy certificates under the Sandrini project that was originally supposed to come online late in 2021. At this point, we're looking at a serious delay there in that project, and that's we basically need to shop around for replacement renewable energy certificates in order to reach our compliance targets by the end of 2024. And normally we would just look around for an alternative source of the product category 1 RECs, but the prices of those have gone up dramatically just in the past year. And that's just really looking like an unaffordable option compared to the contract price we were expecting to be paying for renewable energy certificates right now. So with that, and one other thing I'll mention is that not only do we have to procure a certain amount of these renewable energy certificates, but at least 65% of our requirement needs to come from RECs that are procured under a long-term contract, meaning one of 10 years duration or more. This has driven some of our decision-making in the past, including when we extended the Humboldt Sawmill Company biomass contract to 10 years. That was partly to help, it was really mainly to help us be in compliance on that Senate Bill 350 requirement for long-term renewable procurement. So what we're looking for here, before we get into talking about specific sources that we would get these RECs from, just in this board item that's in front of you right now, we're asking for the board's approval to procure up to that 10% ceiling of our state required RECs using these product category 3 RECs. If we were to do this in the form of long-term contracts, just per our procurement policy and our energy risk management policy, we would be coming back to the board for approval of such contracts. And just looking at the financial implications of this, things have moved so much that the category 1 RECs are expected to cost 6 to 9 times more than the category 3 RECs over the remainder of this compliance period that we're in. So based on that, getting the amount that we're allowed to get of bucket 3 RECs instead of the category 1 RECs could save us $4 to $6 million between now and the end of 2024. But another consideration is just that those product category 1 RECs are currently scarce, especially trying to get them under a long-term contract. So they just might not be available to RCA regardless of price. So hence the staff recommendation to authorize us to meet our compliance needs through buying these category 3 RECs as needed.
Thank you, Richard. Anybody else from staff have any?
Just to kind of highlight, the kind of staggering price increase that's happened in the last couple of years on the like category 1 RECs. I think a big part of that is we're not alone in that, like, we're having project delays. And so because a lot of people are having project delays, well, the way to backfill for that is to go and do, short-term procurement or get, from an existing project, basically go and say, hey, give us some surplus from an existing project. Well, there's only so much of that to go around. As Richard said, we might not even be able to find it. And if we do, it's looking like the prices are going to continue to be pretty exorbitant because everyone's in the same boat. And so this would be a cost saving measure. And I would say, the sort of the net benefit to the world of the different categories of doing a short term or a existing project, PCC 1, category 1 transaction and category 3. If there's 2 different wind projects that are already existing, the category 1 project, you're buying the wind and you're also getting energy that you're putting onto the grid into the California market. In the other case, you're buying the renewable energy certificates from the wind project, but somebody else is getting the energy without the renewable environmental attributes. In neither case are you adding new wind projects into the world, so it's like they're still just the same projects, but one of them you're buying the energy with it. And so unlike things like our, Santorini project or our other projects where we're actually building new renewable projects, going out and paying, 6 to 9 times more than what it's been recently for sort of just somebody's sort of leftovers from their project isn't adding more renewable generation to the state. So.
Thank you, Matthew. So we'll pretty much do the same. I'll take questions and comments and whatnot from the board, then we'll go out to the public. So questions, comments on this? Go ahead, Natalie.
So can you give another example of category 3 RECs that might help my thinking about this as a policy?
I'll use a rooftop solar example. It's not a California example because it's more complex here in California, as you could always imagine. But so in Colorado, where I used to work, the utility would actually buy RECs from rooftop solar arrays. And so they would basically say, hey, we want to buy renewable attribute from your solar array. So you're still using the energy to offset your dryer and your washing machine, your refrigerator, running your meter backwards, the same as we have here. But they basically would say, oh, we're going to take credit. And so in our power content label, we're going to pay, $1 for, megawatt hour the RECs generate. And so they would buy the renewable attribute from the rooftop solar customer. So technically that rooftop solar customer couldn't say my house is powered by solar because they sold the renewable attribute to the utility. And so it's in California, the rules around the metering of the renewable generation is pretty strict. And so, the next agenda item, the reason why they haven't sold those attributes from the power they use on site before is because they didn't have the metering to verify that they, how much they'd actually produced and, and consumed on site. But the next agenda item, not to get ahead of ourselves, but basically they generate power that they export and that generates RECs. Historically, they've used like 40% or something of the power on site, but that hasn't, the renewable attributes they're not being tracked. And so they're installing the metering. So they're able to say, hey, we produced X megawatt hours of renewable power. We use this much of it on site. And so they're keeping the energy to offset their bill. Does that make sense? It's kind of.
I get it. I think I get it. I don't love it, but I get it. So it's really, thank you, because that decoupling piece is really like, we're not getting any direct benefit except in name. No like energy benefit from the REC.
Yeah. So it's a compliance product. It is, so the airport microgrid, we're generating RECs and we're generating power. In theory, we could sell those RECs to somebody else and just keep the electricity. That's not really a good economic decision or compliance decision, but you don't have to keep them together. It's just much more valuable to do that in most cases, unless it's a situation where you actually want the energy to offset your own loads. So
okay, thank you.
Thanks. Go ahead, sir.
Is this the same compliance window that we were talking about? Like, was that last month or 2 months ago when, okay. So it's kind of hard for me to decouple 8.1 from 8.2 and you kind of just explained it to Natalie, but I mean, what like realistically besides, Scotia would be a category 3 rec that we could feasibly buy?
So there could be like a large commercial facility that, has, instead of a biomass plant, has a big solar array. And I don't know, it's Walmart or somebody, and they want to offset their electricity bill. They don't care about the renewable attributes. And so they're saying, well, we're going to use the electricity to offset our bill, but we're going to put in the metering so we can, generate actual measurable renewable energy credits. And then there's a statewide system. So there's a whole process of how those are tracked and retired. And so it's, you can't just sort of say you're doing it. You have to submit it through the system. But it could be I would imagine in most cases, it's, large facilities where somebody for economic reasons wants to offset their bill with the power. So, but then they're generating enough renewables that they want to monetize that by selling the attributes. It could also be a case where, if a project, let's say you had a wind project and you've got a contract for 100 megawatt hours, a month, and you have a really windy month, and so you generated excess and you didn't sell that to somebody, ahead of time, you might have, you generated, the energy already went somewhere and now you're just left with this rec that you want to sell to somebody, but you don't have a contract to couple it with the energy, and that just went into the market. But
And then, so we talked about category 1 and what that price differential looks like, but I mean, is the category 2 rec a possibility too? And what does that price differential look like?
yeah, those have gone up quite a bit as well, and similarly are very scarce. I think Jacqueline Haar might be on and might be useful to promote her up just to.
If I can step in with just one comment on that, Matthew, something that made the category 2 recs a lot less attractive in California is that they changed the rules for emissions counting, so that you basically, the only way that you could use category 2 recs and not be assumed in your emissions reporting to have emissions that are like kind of at the state average emissions level associated with those megawatt hours was to go out and additionally buy the environmental attributes for carbon-free energy, and the combined price of the category 2 recs plus the carbon-free energy, basically that would let you have zero emission category 2 recs in effect. However, the combined cost of those was in the same range as buying the category 1 recs, so there wasn't really like much of an incentive to use those category 2 recs under those new emissions counting rules.
Very clear.
I think I get it.
What happens to the,
Convoluted.
are the rec associated with the residential solar?
Yeah, so
Smoke.
they just go up in smoke basically because you need some pretty sophisticated and expensive metering to be able to do that. And I don't even know if California rules would let you do it. So that's why I said in Colorado, it was sort of straightforward for the utility to say, hey, let's capture that and pay people and put it on our power content label as solar. But we can't feasibly do that.
Or the other questions on the next item. Go ahead. Thank you.
Anybody else from up here? Go ahead, Natalie. Yeah.
So what is I know it's not what we're here to decide, but it helps me think about the policy implications of this longer term. Like, does this help incentivize renewable energy development to basically kind of sell the power twice? It's like, you're selling the power and then you're also selling the rights to claim the green energy.
Yeah. So maybe to kind of take a step back,
my mind or something like,
there's 3 sort of products that you build a wind farm, or a big solar project. There's 3 products that come out of that. There's just the energy itself, which is just like the power. And that's, the CAISO market kind of determines the value of that. There's the resource adequacy capacity value, which is like the reliability piece. And so that's where a storage project doesn't generate any electricity. It doesn't generate any renewable energy certificates, but it can help balance the grid. And so it has a lot of resource adequacy value. That's really what it has. And then there's the renewable attribute, which is tracked through this REC system. And that's how, you say, okay, this isn't just power, it's renewable power. And so, for a wind project, there's all three of those things. You can separate them out and sell them to different people. So you could sell the energy over here, you can sell the REC over here, you can sell the RA over here. People generally try to keep the renewable attribute with the energy because of California's compliance system. And if you separate it, it's worth millions of dollars less to separate it. And so unless you have some reason to separate it, like you're using the electricity to offset your own bill, there's not really it's much better to keep them together because it's much more valuable. But if you're using the power and you're like, well, I don't need to keep, I just want to use the power to offset my bill and I don't need to claim that I'm offsetting my bill with renewables. I just want to offset my bill from a financial standpoint. So every project has those sort of three potential pieces, and it's just whether they stick together or whether they get sold to different people.
And do other CCAs have a policy of avoiding these? Because to me, it seems less transparent to our customers as well in our community.
It's so that there's a reason why we've never done it before, because it's sort of like, oh, why do it? And, and even as Richard said, which was, I failed to mention that accounting emissions rules. So even the category 2 is sort of like a lot less useful now and a lot less valuable from an emissions standpoint. And so I would say most tend to not use it. Although again, it is sort of, if you're like, hey, situations like ours, where we're at the end of this compliance period, our gigantic solar project gets delayed, we got to cover the gap that we have. It's an option to sort of bridge that gap. I would say there are other entities besides CCAs that, like the direct access providers, like who Cal Poly Humboldt buys power from Shell, for example. And I would imagine most of those companies maximize the option to have 10% or whatever it is from category 3 because it's the lowest cost way to get compliance.
So just to make sure I'm understanding what this normally would look. I mean, so say Sandrini was online, then we would be buying the power and the REC from them together as a
unit. So our contract with them, we get everything.
So we're getting right now enough power, but we don't have enough that it's renewable by your little.
Yeah. So we can go and buy power to backfill, but we need to backfill the renewable piece of it as well.
Yes.
That's where it's just, if this was 3 years ago, it'd be like, no problem. We'll just go buy some, category 1. And we've been at for a lot of, the first ramp up years. It's just because there's been so many project delays and it's kind of at the tail end of the compliance period, everybody's scrambling to cover their gap like we are. And so it's.
All right. Anybody else from up here? Go ahead.
And so the staff is recommending going out and seeking what is available.
Yeah.
So you're just asking for going out and seeing what's available under category 3.
Yeah. So this
is category 1 or 2 because of the cost.
Yes, exactly. And we don't have a policy against it, but we've just, in the last 6 years, we've never bought category 3 for the same reason. We're just like, it's just, why go there? When you're facing compliance fines and there's nobody in the market that's willing to sell you what you'd rather buy, then it's like, well, maybe we look at what the options are. So
could we have the staff look at category 1 and 2 and evaluate the cost of that? I mean, I know you said it's really, really high, but I think we should lay all things on the table. I mean, if we don't want to do this category 3 for obvious reasons, I think, we have to lay the value of cost of something versus renewable energy.
And so if we were to propose a transaction, we would have to bring that back to the board because likely the other thing Richard mentioned is we got this sort of long-term compliance piece that again, Sandrini being delayed kind of hammers us on that too. And so we would be bringing back the actual transaction to the board. And that would be a non-CCA voting item because it would be an actual contract And so that actual decision, we could put that in the context of like, well, here's an option to buy this, and here's what, here's what the spot prices are today for an alternative and what that would look like. I think the other thing that,
It does. I was just wondering why we have to, I think the reason why we have to go with category 3 is the cost.
yeah, it's really it's a market scarcity and a cost kind of situation. And we just didn't want to like start evaluating this as even a potential if the board was kind of like, no, don't even show that to us, just because we never have. And so we felt like we should bring it up before we came back with like a proposal. I think something else that we could, like $4 to $6 million in savings when we're talking about, oh, it'd be nice if we had a storage incentive project for rooftop solar customers. Like the board could say, hey, we want to designate the savings from this to a particular, program if there's cost savings. So that's just something to think about too.
Anybody else from up here? Go ahead, Nellie.
So if we were to do this, not to say that's the direction I'm thinking, but if we were to say, hey, yes, we want you to go out and look for what there is for us to potentially consider. Would it, you would bring back information about what's available. And then this board could choose to do that. I mean, so these are what, 10-year contracts?
Well, if it's a 10-year contract, then it would be brought back to the board. If it was like something that was really small, that was like, oh, we're going to go buy a little bit of solar bucket 3 RECs from some project for like a 3-month period or something. So, I mean, we could change this, but the way it's written here is that it would be accordance with the transaction limits in the risk management policy. And so that's anything that's a long-term contract or above certain dollar amounts. This probably wouldn't be above the dollar amounts, it'd be more the duration would be what would cause them to come back to the board. And obviously the next agenda item is on a specific possibility. So,
But if we were to do this on just to like fill a gap, essentially, you would go out and look for those and buy them and consistent with the policy without it coming back here, and you would determine.
If it was a small amount and a short term,
Okay.
that would be something that, unless you wanted to.
That wouldn't fit our 10-year, that wouldn't fit the 10.
Yeah, that's not.
But yeah, so the 10-year, if it was a 10-year deal, for example, it would have to come back to the board.
So this would just keep us from losing compliance for like this, it sounds like there's a shortfall of RECs that we need to make up for this fiscal year. This compliance year.
2024, yeah.
For 2024.
The period ends in 2024. What's that? Richard, it's like, I don't know off the top of my
It's
head.
2021 through 2024. But I think the caveat to be aware of, so we're most of the way through the compliance period since we're in the second half of 2023 now. So that's kind of the time sensitivity of this whole topic, is that we have limited time left to be able to procure enough of those RECs to be deemed compliant for that 2021 to 2024 period. And the other thing is, because there's also this other dimension of being compliant with Senate Bill 350, having to have a portion of our procurement under 10-year contracts. One of the things that we're looking for here is approval from the board to have at least some of that bucket 3 RECs procurement be in 10-year contracts. So we would be on the hook for those for years to come.
And so, sorry, just continuing with this question, I'm almost done.
Fine, now, this is, go for it. Y'all understand.
So if we were to do this action, not the next action.
Right.
That's a separate thing, but this action, we could also give sideboards, like we are supportive of you buying them if they're solar projects or whatnot. I mean, I know that's not what it says here, and that constrains you further. We could, as a board, give that type of direction, right?
Well, and two, I mean, see, it's hard. It's really hard for me to decouple them, right? So if we approve this and we say yes, category 3, but then we say no other things, then you would go back and look for category 1 or category 3, and then bring those back to us as a choice.
Yeah, we could do that, and I think, again, there's a parallel decision. So you couldn't say, hey, we're okay with category 3, but we want it to only be from zero emitting resources. So no biomass or geothermal or something like that. And so that would be an option.
Go ahead, Nancy.
And the other thing, and maybe this is already clear, is that you could decouple the procurement under the energy risk management policy, which is the shorter term contracts, from just simply initiating procurement outside the energy risk category, because staff is asking you to do both, to initiate procurement, but then ultimately the contract would come back to you if Matthew doesn't, or the Energy Authority doesn't have the authority in the energy risk management policy.
And I mean, so I guess we do need a level of 10-year longer term contracts to meet that SB 350 requirement, but right now, I mean, this is really to fill a shortfall. And so, I mean, are those short-term contracts more enticing, or is it great if we do find a 10-year one and are able to do that? And
it's,
instead,
I think it's, because we have both gaps to fill, there's sort of, it's enticing to sort of check two boxes with one solution, because it's like, well, if we didn't do a long-term agreement, then we're still short on the long-term agreement. So we got to go find some other long-term agreement, and so we're back to sort of the same bind. Now, one thing to keep in mind is even if you have a 10-year agreement, so that the rules say you have to sign up for a 10-year contract, that doesn't mean you have to keep it. Like you can, you're committed to buying it, but you can remarket it and you could, you could sell it. So if you didn't want it in your portfolio in the long term, you could every year say, hey, who wants to buy this thing that we have a 10-year contract for? And
that's what's in my mind, that, cross your fingers, but hopefully it's going to take less than 10 years for Sandrini to come online and us to be able to, buy that power in those regs. So, okay, that makes sense.
Go ahead, Chris.
What is our shortfall? How far out of compliance will we be?
Richard, do you
Yeah,
have it?
Yeah, we're looking for somewhere in the neighborhood of 95,000 renewable energy certificates to procure between now and the end of 2024 to meet our compliance needs. If we were to, that is, if we were to buy these bucket 3 RECs, because there is that cap on how much of it can come from bucket 3 RECs.
And what's the penalty? Do we lose our designation, or are we fined?
Yeah, we do get fined. I will say among the community choice aggregator community, there's really more concern about reputational harm than there is about the fines these days. The CPUC seems to be looking for every stick it can to beat up on our business model. And we've recently seen that some of the CCAs have been denied their ability to expand their service territory to serve new communities on the basis of non-compliance with procurement obligations from the CPUC. So, I think that's kind of the thing that's keeping us awake a little bit more than the potential for fines, although we would certainly want to avoid the fines as well.
So I'm recalling from like our past meeting though, that we really kind of did have the discussion that we were okay with having to spend this more money, because I think when we were talking about it, it was that we would probably go with these category 1 procurements, and that, the transparency of that and knowing where it's coming from and the environmental lens to look at it. I think as a board, didn't we, and remind me, maybe I'm just making this up in my head, but that we were like, okay, we realized that we are going to have to probably take that financial hit to be into compliance.
Yes. And so I think that the challenge is just if we can't find it at any price.
Yeah,
sort of.
true. And then that the scarcity, I guess, also is part of that too. Okay. Thank you for that reminder.
Okay. Are there any carbon offset that you can use at all as part of certificates? I don't know what's in these categories, like solar, wind.
Yeah. So, as far as things that qualify as renewable, it's solar, wind, geothermal, biomass or biogas, like, digesters and things like that for like dairy waste. What am I forgetting? Small hydroelectric. So large hydroelectric doesn't qualify. And then nuclear doesn't qualify. So large hydroelectric and nuclear are considered like carbon free. And so they don't necessarily have, greenhouse gas emissions attributes. And that's where Richard was saying, well, the way that they changed the rules a couple of years ago, if you buy Oregon wind and bring it into California, even if you bring in energy with it, they treat it as like brown power from an emission standpoint. And so you'd have to buy zero carbon hydropower to pair with that. And then it ends up being more expensive than just buying the main renewables. So.
Go ahead, Chris.
I have a question. So when you're trying to procure these contracts, are they time sensitive? So would there be time for you to come back to the board for us to approve or deny them? Or is the time sensitivity too much if it's a small term? Short term?
If it was a long-term contract, we would have to bring it back to the board. So whether we liked it or not, I would say for sort of small quantities, it can be fairly time sensitive. And again, I think those would be amounts that would be pretty minimal in the, as far as our overall portfolio. I mean, if we went and bought, a batch of solar RECs or something, it's like, okay, it's going to show up on our power content label as a little bit more solar. It wouldn't be a large piece of our portfolio. And so, I would say, if we could check the compliance box and have it be sort of minimal, kind of just small transactions, that would, be pretty straightforward. It's more of the longer term kind of, bigger volume piece. It's the next agenda item. That's probably the controversial one. Not if we bought like
Got to figure out the controversy on this one though, and then the next one will be easy, right? No.
Okay, there's Natalie and Nancy. Natalie, do you want to go first or?
Well, I think Nancy probably
I
has.
wanted to address this because if the board is interested in having staff bring back any of the procurement that is already authorized under the risk management policy, that's going to have to be very carefully crafted because you've already adopted that procurement policy. And I'm reluctant to have you sort of right now on the fly kind of upsetting that procurement policy. I think you're sort of in the procurement policy or you're not. And then we look at amending that. But, I wouldn't say add on now that you want all of these, short-term already qualifying for immediate purchase under the energy risk management policy to come back to the board. And I don't know if that's what you were asking, but I just want to clarify that. I think that's a little bit of an obstacle.
Okay, let's do this. So watching the time here, Natalie's been waiting. I'd like to do Natalie, and then I'd like to go out to the public because they've been really patient. And then I'll bring it back to the board. Okay, go ahead, Natalie.
Thank you. So you mentioned that category 1 RECs are difficult to source at any cost. Are category 2 RECs as difficult? Are we able to lean into that as an alternative?
Jacqueline responded.
Oh, sorry, that's a good answer. Jacqueline Haar, who's online, said not difficult, impossible to procure at the moment. So
Nothing is what?
they're impossible to procure at the moment. So there's nobody selling them right now.
Category 1,
Or two.
category 1 and 2.
Just two.
Just 2.
To two.
One are hard to come by.
They're hard to come by and expensive too, or just not on the market. And part of that's also because our neighboring states now have like renewable targets and emissions targets. And so where before they could say, oh, let's sell our wind to California.
Gotcha.
They're a little bit more interested in keeping it themselves now. So.
And what you're saying, Nancy, about the risk management policy and procurement, like if we were to say hypothetically, yes, you can buy these, but they have to be zero emissions, that would be meddling with that existing policy. Is that kind of what you're saying?
I'm not sure.
No, I don't think that would be sort of different guidance, but it would be, the policies about like price and volume and term limits as far as how much and for how long. And so if you provided us with guidance that said, hey, we want any category 3 RECs that staff isn't bringing back to the board to be from zero emission sources, that would be straightforward for us to work with.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks. All right, so at this point, I'd like to go ahead.
So
Eileen, did you say that 1 and 2 are both difficult or impossible?
The message Jacqueline Harrison was specific to PCC 2. At 1, or from my understanding, are difficult and expensive, but she was saying right now PCC 2 are impossible to procure right now.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd like to take it out to the public now because I've been waiting really patiently. So we'll do the in-person public first, and then we'll go out to the online. So this is 8.1, but we'll also do 8.2. No, really, seriously, the 2 cracks.
It'll also be 8.2.
I mean, there'll be,
Well,
there'll be another opportunity.
Want to do 8.2?
8.1 right now.
Just
And
about
then
that.
we're gonna do 8.2.
Just about going out for procurement.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead. And we're limiting it to 3 minutes.
Hi, I'm Dan Chandler, and I think it's a very intelligent discussion. I'm glad I was here for it. I see 3 things that you need to consider and try and build in your decision if you can. One is that whatever you get should be carbon free. That seems sort of elementary, but given biomass, that's not, and large hydros also. The second is it should be additive. And if Costco or Google puts in solar because they feel it's the thing that they should do and that they're going to be rewarded as a business, then it's not additive. They're going to do that anyhow. And the third thing is we are really behind on our wind and solar from where we need to be. We're talking about increasing our electricity by 3 times before 2045. And we're way behind on that. So I would ask, is there any likelihood that things are going to get cheaper? You know, people are going to be looking for this resource, and it's not going to be there for a long time. So this may be actually not the high cost period, but the low cost period. Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Walt Paniak, Arcata. I have a question about can these unbundled credits be applied for past periods? Because the reason I bring this up is I have a screenshot before COVID, where you could go out to the California Energy Commission and look at the data, because and I said, why are there 2 columns? And they have gross and net. And so somewhere along the line, that data has been applied. This example happens to be in 2017, and I did a screenshot in 2019. And I couldn't be able to download it because they were kind of primitive. They only had it in a scrollable PDF file and not a downloadable one. But again, the question is, can you roll it back for, let's say, this year?
Thank you. I think with staff with questions, if you can kind of keep note of them, and then we can address them all at once at the end of the public part. Anybody else? Okay, I'm not seeing anybody in the room. So how about public online?
I see no hands were raised.
Okay. So did you understand, Matthew, what the question was?
So, I mean, Richard, do you want to answer that, or I could take a stab at it?
So it was just about whether bucket 3 RECs in particular can be procured retroactively for past years.
Yeah.
I believe the answer is no.
All right.
Okay.
It's definitely not the case for category 1 and again, or category 2. That's where we haven't done too much. We haven't done anything with bucket 3 before, but in some places you can. Again, California's rules are different, where you could buy old RECs to attribute to your goals, but
Yeah, I have confirmation from staff here that that's not possible to do under California's rules. It would have to be
Okay.
within the same compliance period.
Right.
In the spirit of time, I would say that I'm comfortable with this as long as these recs come from zero emission sources. So that's where I stand.
Can I ask a question before we make a motion? I imagine staff are familiar with shopping for these, or at least the idea of it. And are there zero emission or carbon-free sources of RECs available on the market?
That'll be a good question for Jacqueline Har, I think.
She's not on.
Oh, did we lose her?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Richard, I don't know if you've had conversations.
Jocelyn from our team is checking on that right now. To tell the truth, we have not begun shopping for bucket 3 RECs because we wanted to see the board's take on this first. So we did have the one opportunity presented to us unsolicited that the next board item is about. But other than that, we have not been pursuing RECs. Yeah, so we can, but I'm told we can, but there's a price premium.
Okay. And okay, I think that answers my question.
Okay, thanks. So yeah, we have a motion. We can amend motions. We can, I'm going to leave that up to those of you who can vote.
You look ready.
I'm thinking about, yeah, I'm reading this up here. I'm reading what the actual motion is. Okay, so I would make a motion for 8.1 with the stipulation that these sources come from carbon-free sources.
I'll second.
Okay, got that? All right. All in favor, raise your hand.
And I can't vote.
So that is unanimous, unanimous for the vote.
8.2.
Negated 8.2.
Yes.
Now all these people want to.
There was no nays. There was nay, and then there's no nays and there's no abstains. Okay. So staff has direction.
Correct.
All right.
Thank you.
Do we move on to 8.2? So the question then is with this one, this particular bucket 3 rec, and you said carbon free, yeah? That was in the last motion. So there's my question.
You need to recuse yourself.
Oh, yeah, right. Well, yes, yeah. Okay, go ahead and take this part over. Okay, thank you. I am recusing myself because I have a remote conflict of interest with Humboldt Sawmill Company.
And then
Do I?
No, right.
Right.
Right? I don't work for Humboldt Road.
the SVPC looks back 12 months.
How long?
12 months.
Work for them for 12 months.
I guess I have a conflict of interest.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Okay, so now we are on item 8.2. And so my question is, if we just pass that motion on 8.1, do we even address this item? It's on the agenda, so we have to, but.
Yeah, so and that's where I wasn't quite sure if you were saying that if we're going to go and staff's doing things under the policy as usual, that it would have to comply with being carbon free. I guess, it's still discuss whether this particular transaction would be something you want to.
Okay, we can do that. Okay, well, so then do we have a staff report on 8.2?
Who's gonna about that?
Yeah, this is Richard again. Happy to proceed with that. This, as you know, this staff report refers back to the previous staff report and just the need that was brought up there, which we've already discussed in some detail for potentially backfilling our renewable energy shortfall with these PCC3 RECs. So a few months ago, Humboldt Sawmill Company approached RCEA with an opportunity to to buy these category 3 RECs. And this is based on the energy that's consumed at their sawmill. Until now, they haven't had the metering in place to be able to claim these RECs from this energy that are using on site. So this is kind of a textbook case of product category 3 RECs where the energy is being used by one party, namely the same folks that are generating it, and the RECs are available to be sold to another party. So staff's take on this was because of the delays in the Sandrini solar project and our fairly dire need for renewable energy certificates to get us through the end of this compliance period, and having some of that under long-term procurement, that we wanted to recommend this to the board for consideration. Some of the reasons that we think this is worth considering is there is no other currently available source of RECs, be it category 3 or otherwise, that we could buy within our own service area at this time. We're years away from having any project at this scale online from which we could procure if we wanted to kind of go with the board's directive to prioritize local procurement. Another point is just that unlike sort of generic category 3 RECs that we could ask TEA to go out and shop for on our behalf, where the chain of custody might not be transparent. The origin of these RECs is, plainly visible in the community. You can drive down the road and see where this is coming from, and it's associated with some economic activity that's returning value to our county. The RECs, since they're associated with energy use already taking place, we're not talking about stimulating any new emissions by procuring these RECs. And I'll just say, looking at HSC and kind of holding them up in comparison with some of the other parties that we've entered into contracts with in the last few years, I'll just really say they've been trustworthy and cooperative from staff's perspective. As a business partner, they came to, after getting into contract with them in 2017 and then having some financial challenges earlier in our program, they were willing to come to the table with us and renegotiate the contract at much more favorable terms financially. And that, coupled with the increase in energy prices and renewable energy certificate prices elsewhere in the market, have made it so that we're actually in financially good shape and in the black in terms of buying energy from them. It comes in below what we'd be paying on the market otherwise. So if the alternative were issuing a solicitation to look for these category 3 RECs, we just felt that it was more favorable to our CEA for these reasons to go into sole source negotiations with HSC. So that was what we were looking for the board's approval on. And in terms of financial impact, it looks like from the data that we've gotten from them on their sawmill energy use that we would be able to buy between 25,000 and 30,000 of these bucket 3 RECs per year. And that would equate to between about 35 and 40% of our total compliance period 4 need that could be fulfilled with bucket 3 RECs. So in other words, we'd still have to go out and shop for some additional bucket 3 RECs, under the permission that the board has just given us. The cost savings compared to if we were to buy these from category 1 RECs, we'd be looking at about $1.3 to $1.6 million savings between October, when HSC plans to start making these RECs available, and the end of the compliance period in December 2024. So those are some of the considerations we have. The longer term savings are speculative because we just really don't know what's going to happen with REC prices in these different product categories. So hence our recommendation. And I think the only other thing I wanted to say is, this is quite time sensitive, just in terms of what alternatives we have for being in compliance in this current compliance period, and especially if the board, wants to have staff continue to procure locally where possible. This is really our only local alternative. Thank you.
And And just one clarification on something Richard said, because he said the percentage of what, sort of our compliance need is. The actual volume based off of our overall power load is more like 3 or 4% of our power load. So it's not a big piece of the overall power mix, but it would be a significant chunk towards that kind of compliance gap that we have to fill.
And one additional clarification on top of that clarification is that the category 3 RECs that to the extent that we buy those get reported as a line item on our power content label that we distribute to customers each year. However, it does not show up in the pie chart because we're not actually buying the energy that goes with it. And the pie chart is only, that shows, how much percent of our energy is coming from different categories. It only reflects actual energy purchases.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Matthew.
And the last thing I'll just say is, just to reiterate that, if we did enter into a longer term agreement, we wouldn't have to keep that. We could remarket it. And so, one way to look at it is, well, we could buy it, meet our needs, and then remarket it, going forward. Or if we don't do it, then they'll sell it to somebody else directly. So.
So do we have any clarifying questions from the board? And then we'll go to our very patient public. Thank you. Go, Natalie.
So you were saying we need about 95,000 and there's 25 to 30,000 available? Is that accurate?
That's correct. That's when the 35 to 40% I was talking about was how much of our capped amount of compliance we're able to get through bucket 3 RECs, which is that 95,000.
I see. Thank you.
Any other questions from the board? Okay, let's take it out to the public then. So if you're here to make comment on 8.2, head on up to the podium. Just we can even go down that line almost here. So 3 minutes.
I timed it for 2, so I hope that will work out. I'm Dan Chandler, and I'm representing the steering committee of 350 Humboldt. We have 570 members in Humboldt County. RCEA initiated a power purchase agreement in 2017 based on the HSC statements that they had had only a few air quality violations in the past several years. Within a month, the Air Quality District informed RCEA that there had been over 700 air quality violations in the past 2 years. Please see the comments that we distributed for documentation. We have the letter from the Air Quality District there in that report. RCEA staff persuaded the board in 2021 that a requirement for long-term renewable power should be met by biopower rather than solar or wind. This locks RCEA into guaranteed greenhouse gas emissions of 295,000 metric tons a year, or almost 3 million metric tons of CO2 during the 10-year contract. All 3 million tons will be causing warming for hundreds of years. Now, RCEA staff are asking you to endorse what amounts to a 10-year-long scam on the ratepayers. The ratepayers will buy renewable energy certificates for 10 years. I don't know who would buy them if you tried to sell them, but those certificates won't get them any additional energy. So 1.6 million for what? Instead, the ratepayers will be subsidizing the profit-making operations of Humboldt Sawmill, which have not changed for the last 30 years. It is hard to imagine a worse way of addressing a 2-year shortfall in long-term solar. Please reject the staff proposal and direct them to meet the spirit of the law by purchasing additive, no carbon, green electricity. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Joanna Welch and I live here in Eureka, and I've seen the graphs that biomass is significantly worse than coal. And where we are in the world, look around what's happening, all the fires, everything that's happening. We cannot go with something that's worse than coal. It's just, that's horrendous. We just can't do it. We have to move forward. We have to move forward very quickly, and we can't go backwards.
Thank you.
Walt Paniak, Arcata. I do not support purchasing unbundled RECs from HSC. If these were purchased, RCEA ratepayers would be paying a portion of HSC's behind-the-meter costs. These costs should be allocated to the price of lumber and not shifted to ratepayers to provide additional income to a $1 billion plus privately held company. Behind-the-meter RECs from HSC reward inefficiencies. That is, the more power they use, the more unbundled credits that can be justified. The EPA defines ability to monetize RECs, but only when power goes to the grid. CPUC rules are apparently more liberal. My rhetorical questions. Has paying more than the market price for local power caused us to be in the situation where reserves are at risk in 2024? Next, who is responsible for the REC arbitrage challenge where ratepayers could pay more to a privately held company for power used by that same company for its own private benefit? This one is somewhat humorous, but maybe. Can HSC gift RCA these unbundled credits just to be a good neighbor until the end of December 2024? Finally, the Federal Energy Information Agency report number 943 shows power plant data by date and by energy source. HSC's plant ID is 50049. HSC cogenerates with diesel oil when needed. In 2022, they reported that 5,901 barrels or 246,842 gallons of diesel fuel was used for power. January to May 2023, HSC reports 48,720 gallons of diesel fuel used. Are these quantities of fossil fuel reported and price adjusted and exempt from RECs? This is likely the coolest summer for the next millennium until we do our utmost to save our youth from catastrophe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Board. My name is John Schaefer, no relation to Sarah. Right out front, I'd like to say that Dr. Wendy Ring is probably right in her criticisms of what's going on at Sawmill. So I hope you'll take that into account in your decisions today. Let me say, I've spent most of my engineering career in electric power, and since 1985 worked on renewable energy, mostly solar and wind. My clients have included utilities, manufacturers, government agencies, EPRI, and the United Nations. So I know something about electricity supply, but I am worried for my grandchildren. And the choice we make today affects my grandchildren and yours too. We have a climate crisis that we're not addressing. I think our CEA is doing a marvelous job, actually, in the face of great difficulty. We, residents of Humboldt, would like our CEA to attain its goal of clean electricity by 2025. Doesn't look like we're headed that way yet, but what we need to do, first of all, is not do dumb things along the way. I have to say, I think our continued relationship with Humboldt Sawmill is a dumb thing. They're big polluters and they're expensive. And if we are to purchase any RECs from Humboldt Sawmill, we should insist that they clean up their act. They have apparently been unwilling to do that. This REC proposal really offers just image rather than substance, and it diverts us citizens, and you board members from a much more important issue, which is how to supply electricity that's clean without making the crisis worse. So I hope the board will just dispense with RECs from Humboldt Sawmill unless they clean up their act. And finally, there are probably RECs available from all of us who have solar on our roofs. We're selling our electricity. I don't think we're selling our RECs. That'd require some difference in metering. I have the metering in place at my house. I don't know what other people do, but it may be that we can get a few RECs from local solar panels. Thank you.
Good afternoon again. I submitted a written letter, so I hope you've had a chance to read that. It has a kind of a hairball idea at the end that we guys just see in order to get them to go solar, because they could have a utility solar. But I'm here now to read a letter from a friend who could not attend, and I'll do my best to read this. I wish to comment on the use of biomass. If you're advertising quote unquote clean energy and using biomass, this would be considered greenwashing or a scam on your clients. Biomass is nowhere near clean energy. Please no longer use it. I called a month ago to be deleted from your client list because of biomass burning. Please no longer use biomass. This is signed by Pat Kanzler. She's a nurse who lives in Eureka. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Martha Walt, and I'm a member of 350 Humboldt and Humboldt Clean Air Coalition, which is 17 local environmental, health, political, and social organizations that agree that the type of biomass electricity generated by Humboldt Sawmill Company is a climate and health hazard. In other words, the sort of thing that stands between us and a viable future. After discovering that the Scotia plant's numerous pollution violations are just as bad news as the 300,000 metric tons of CO2 every year, climate and health advocates have been hoping that RCA would sketch out a plan for how to transition away from biomass as soon as possible. I know it can't happen overnight, but if RCA withdrew its financial support and seal of approval, sooner or later, HSC would get the message that there are better technologies available, including electricity that does not involve incineration. I have to admit that even after that very long and interesting discussion, I still don't understand why unbundled RECs were even invented. Why would the renewable attribute be split from the energy? I don't understand their utility. Nothing actually changes except money changing hands. If I understand correctly from the agenda, staff also suggest selling Category 1 certificates in order to buy more of the abstract value Category 3 certificates. That sounds like withdrawing support from solar and wind energy in order just to display empty credentials. It just seems like sheer desperation to me. And I wonder, is this a back to the wall situation where RCA is fighting for its life? If that is not the case, then please don't turn your back on your mandate to help lead us to the clean energy future. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Andrea Arman. I live in Arcata, work in Eureka. I really appreciate your work and your intentions as a board, and as it's huge, it's so complex. So I don't have any intention of acting like that's not still the case. Totally is. However, I am very opposed to investing in renewable energy certificates with this Scotia Sawmill. And I agree with everything people have said, so I won't say that again. The couple of things is it's important, I think, to remember that it's not really a renewable resource because of where we are in the timeline of our climate crisis. Those trees aren't renewable in the time we're talking about. So it's kind of a fallacy to talk about that. And the other thing, it's sort of been alluded to, but I'm a nurse and I know that the toxins, there are many toxins that come from the biomass in addition to the huge carbon load. And that's important. And that those are costs that are built and come back to us, health costs of people being sick from all those toxins. And it's real. And there are statistics to show it. So thank you.
All right, do we have any more folks in person wishing to comment? All right, we'll take it to Zoom.
We have a hand raised, Mr. Pelkey.
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thanks for the opportunity to address the group here today. For introduction, my name is Jim Pelkey. I'm the financial officer for Humboldt Sawmill Company. To get things started, but what I want to emphasize here is that HSC has been and is committed to operating in full compliance with this permit to operate and all applicable regulations and will continue to do so. The next couple of minutes, I will explain to you and give you a demonstrate what the process has been over the last 5 years, 6 years under this contract and what we've done to make sure that to demonstrate that. I want to explain how the notice of violation process works. And it talks about, it's really the communication with the Air District. The Air District, through their own monitoring or reports they receive from our staff, will see an emission in excess of an allowable threshold per our permit. They may issue a notice of violation per their initial assessment of that incident. Often these exceedances are caused by an upset condition at the plant, and if they occur during a startup or a shutdown, which happen frequently, that relates to the upset condition, and if reported timely and handled properly, it is often not a violation and is actually within the permit thresholds. After receiving the notice of violation from the Air District, we'll take the time to respond by completing or providing our account of the exceedance in terms of reason for the upset condition, the log of our communication with the district, and why we believe it's not a permit violation. Sometimes there's a back and forth with questions with the district, calls, emails. At some point, we've had regular communications with them set up and established. And once the district reviews our position on it, they will issue a decision as to whether the violation is a violation or that it's allowable within the permit. I'll give you a little history of here. We entered the contract in 2017, and we bought the plant in 2015. We had a lot of trouble in 2016 with operating that plant, and we did get front and center with the district. They held us accountable for the mistakes that were made in 16, and we worked through them and to the point of signing the contract with RCEA. Since 2016 or 17, when the contract was signed, we've had few violations with the Air District, very few. I'm not going to go into the number. I don't have it handy right now, but that's what's happened since 2017. In 2023, we've had issues. Initially, we had 2 earthquakes that were dated December, I think 20th last year and January 1st. We worked to get the plant back up and running, and we had problems.
That's what that timer sounds like. Okay, thank you, sir. That has been your 3 minutes. Appreciate your comments. All right, next comment on Zoom. Sorry, that timer sounds different than the one I'm used to.
Next, we have Deborah Dukes. And you able to unmute?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Deborah Dukes. I'm a resident of Eureka, an active member of 350 Humboldt. a current member of the Eureka Energy Committee, and owner of a net negative home. I want to thank both the board members and the RCEA staff for your very, very hard work. You have personally taken me through electrifying my old house, signing on to the Swell Energy battery program and trying to figure it out. I recognize your hard work. I recognize that this is very difficult. You have very difficult decisions to make. That said, biomass, regardless of who classifies it as clean and renewable energy, is not. As a previous speaker mentioned, we don't have time to grow mature trees from seedlings to replace the ones that are being cut now. I would like to ask you to please stick to your resolution from 2019, I think it was, to get to 100% clean and renewable electricity by 2025. I would like for you to not go ahead with this biomass contract. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments on Zoom?
Yes. Trying to multitask.
Great.
We have Ellen Taylor. I'm gonna ask you to unmute.
Yes. Good evening. This is Ellen Taylor. Thank you for the opportunity. I wanted to request that you read my word piece, which is in the Times Standard yesterday, which is on woody biomass. And also I'm going to send you a letter that I sent, a comment letter on an environmental impact statement for Golden State Natural Resources. This is a company that proposes to establish wood pellet plants in Modoc and in Tuolumne counties. And the one in Tuolumne, I think, is going to be the largest in the world. You may have noticed that woody biomass is becoming one of the important fuels worldwide. And it's a double tragedy because it's, for example, it's ruined the whole southeast of the United States. All the trees there have been removed because once you get the infrastructure in place, trees start to be eaten and larger trees. And it's playing an important role in a lot of the countries in Southeast Asia and other places. And there's a big market in Europe and other places. I mentioned Golden State Natural Resources and Golden State Financial Authority because Financial Authority is the one that's going to approve the environmental impact statement, allowing Golden State Natural Resources to rake the trees over in that area. Rex Bone, who is my supervisor, sits on that board. And I cannot doubt that the reason he's on the board of Golden State Financial Authority is in order to learn about biomass. And Humboldt County would be like a sitting duck for woody biomass use. And I'm very afraid that if you engage with this sawmill, that will be the nidus from which biomass production and generation and collection will begin to burgeon and become one of our industries. And again, once the infrastructure is in place, it could just, continue to tear our forests apart. Forest is what we've got up here. We've got big, beautiful forests, and the woody biomass is part of those forests. And it would just be the beginning of another tragedy. And a comment that Rex made at the resource board was, it's going to be recognized. It already has been recognized as not a renewable fuel by the IPCC, but soon everybody will recognize it. So Rex's comment was, we better hurry up because pretty soon they'll catch up to us. So it's a sort of a back to the wall situation. It sounds like I've been listening to the Byzantine narrative that you've been going through, and it sounds, I have tremendous sympathy for you, but please, and when I was listening to the Golden State environmental impact statement.
Thank you. That is your 3 minutes. We appreciate your comments.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Next Zoom comment.
We have Ellen Goya. I'm going to ask you to unmute, Ellen.
Hi, my name is actually Ellen Gola.
Gola, sorry about that.
Oh, that's fine. I used to come to a lot of these RCA board meetings going back years. And I am actually not in the community choice aggregation program. I opted out in protest to the biomass years ago. And I would like to support RCEA, but I can't as long as you keep supporting Humboldt Sawmill Company. And I just want to state my recommendation that you not get the RECs from Humboldt Sawmill Company. It's really time for you to focus on real clean energy. That's what we need. Thank you. That's all I need to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Wendy Ring. Wendy, I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Thanks. I'm not going to say very much because you got a lot from me in writing, but I wanted to make sure that you do realize that the Humboldt Del Norte County Medical Society wrote to RCEA asking not to enter into any new contracts with Humboldt Sawmill Company.
Okay, thank you, Wendy. All right, do we have any other Zoom comments?
We do have a request to allow Jim Pelkey to continue his comment from Humboldt Sawmill.
Nancy, what do you think?
Because the project involves his plant, it's within your discretion. You are obligated to treat all members of the public the same, but it's not clear that in this situation. I sort of defer to you and staff.
Okay, I was gonna say, yeah, why weren't they? Should we have invited them? I don't know.
If I can just speak up for a second, this is Richard, and I actually did invite Mr. Pelkey to join this meeting, and my expectation was that he would have a chance to present. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Okay, and I defer to Richard on that one. Let him finish his comment there.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Done. Thank you. I should have timed that earlier, but I did go a little fast. Sorry about that. What I was talking about 2023 and some of the things that I'm hearing folks talk about. I explained the process of the NOV and the back and forth, the chance to initially discuss what our view was on whether it's within the permit. And the several that we've received 10, excuse me. We received 11 NOVs during 2023, and they're all during the performance of our plant from January to March. We've responded in volumes to the district, and we await we've involved in some Q&A. We await to hear from them in terms of the conclusion on them. One of the NOVs that we did receive related to that period has been resolved in terms of that the district agrees we were in compliance with our permit to operate, and there was not a violation. I'm not saying the law found it will roll out that way. I'm not sure, but we are still in the process of waiting to hear back from the district after we've provided our logs and view and position on what happened in those emission exceedances. Okay. I will also mention that we are operating under a permit to operate that does not have the more stringent thresholds of Boiler MAC. And the history of Boiler MAC is it's evolved it's taken very many iterations over the last 15 years as it's evolved as a compliance instrument. And we fully anticipate our next permit to operate will include those Boiler MAC requirements. And we have been in communication with the district for quite a lengthy period of time as they draft that new permit to operate, and we expect it to reflect the Boiler MAC requirements, and we will then adhere to all the requirements within the permit and continue to do what we have done, and that's comply with the permit that we currently operate under. There's a couple other communications we've had with the district in addition to the NOVs. We've also had like I said, the permit to operate. The district has requested some comm reports, which is the continuous capacity monitoring system reports. And we have provided what we have available for that. We did have some gaps, and we're working to resolve that. We're also complying with all the tests, which we've always done. We weren't able to produce the report for a couple of quarters, but we are in the process of making sure that we're compliant with RADA, source testing, and the comms testing on a quarterly basis. And we're in high communications with the district currently, and have been for 6 months. And that's really all I would like to say. I think the last thing would be the use of diesel in our operations is not to produce power; it's to set up the operation. So I heard that mentioned earlier. That's not completely accurate. And we continue to review other options other than biomass. And as you may or may not know, some of those are cost prohibitive relative to return. And we're looking for partnerships in those opportunities, and we'll continue to do so. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Are there any follow-up thoughts, questions, or anything from the board, or motions, non-motions?
Do we still have enough people?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and with CCE, isn't it by
Yeah.
can we have different amounts of guidance?
I would say, I think it's probably clear that the writing is kind of on the wall with this one, given our previous decision. I'm not in favor of moving forward with this. I understand some of the pros and cons. I really hear you about, from a staff perspective, about some of the pros. And I appreciate HSC reps being here to talk about some of the things they're doing. And I would certainly say that personally, I'd be interested in entertaining, if you're able to generate power in other ways, I'd be certainly interested to see how that evolves. But, consistent with our previous action about carbon-free RECs, that's where I'm landing on this. Happy to make the motion or hear from other people. We want to hear some more commentary.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in full kind of on the same page as you here, especially just with my particular constituency. Maybe Arcade is a little more green than some other communities, but seeing the request in front of us, especially from NEC and Epic and 350 Humboldt, which all make their homes in Arcata. I don't feel comfortable moving forward with this until we have a little bit more information on some of these, some of the work that the biomass technical group wanted to work on, and also some of these violations. So I'm not necessarily ready to move on that. Skip, yes.
I would tend to go with a staff recommendation. But if this were not approved, what might be the impact when the leadership gathers tomorrow to deal with going out and searching elsewhere?
Yeah, that's what we would do. We'd go and look for something else to fill the gap. So we're not sure what that would be yet, because we need to go out to the market and see if anybody's selling. So
this is to enter into negotiation. Do we have anything to bargain with as far as providing incentive to HSC?
I mean, obviously we would have to, bargain about the price if we were going to enter into an agreement. As far as, they're installing the metering because there's a market for the RECs. And so, if they don't sell it to us, they would sell them to somebody else. I think, so I'm not sure, if there was the suggestion that they might give them to us. I don't know. We could bring that up with Jim Pelkey, but
Is it within our authority to bargain incentive with them?
I don't think, I mean, if we had a bargaining chip, it would be to pay more than like market price, which is, we wouldn't be looking to pay more. And so I think, this type of thing is fairly like uniform sort of commodity in the sense that somebody's saying, hey, I need my compliance 3. I'm going to go out and get bids and say, okay, here's what I can, meet my compliance with. So I think there's not a lot of range on like the price that, they're going to get somewhere else versus from us.
Yeah, and I'm thinking other than price, but fewer air quality reminders or visits or whatever.
Yeah, I'm not sure how we would.
Wondering.
Well, and I think that's too why, we need that information, even if you want to make that a point of bargaining. So. Yes.
Well, I think this is, the discussion on this is a foregone conclusion. We're not going to vote on this. We just passed one, right? So unfortunately.
We could, but.
We don't need a vote. Just can't vote on this because we've just made policy that says we can't do it.
You would be suspending policy you just adopted. in
So
one situation.
We could in the face of that policy, but I don't think it sounds like that wouldn't pass anyway. So. All right.
Well, I mean, I guess ask if there's a motion.
Yeah. Is there a motion? And if there is not a motion, I was going to say this, I think it might, as my time leading meetings, I think this might be the first time I've ever had okay, well, there's no motion. You just pull it off. Yeah.
It dies for lack of motion.
Scott, you were referring to 8.1.
Yeah, so because we passed 8.1, we can't really.
A stipulation
goes against
brand
Well,
policy.
we could suspend our policy and vote on this, but I don't have the appetite for that. I'll just say that.
Yeah. Same. All right. Well, that brings us end of that. So let's get our chair back and our other director and maybe stretch some legs. Good. Near the end here.
Funny.
Thank you folks for being here.
Done it willingly. Mitigate the I'm glad for environmental projects they have to do because they took me down there. Oh, restoration project. They were like, you know her.
I remember this
And they didn't
project.
think about it being a. I'm like, aren't you such a good sport?
And there was one.
So we take the break. We're gonna take a fuck. Yeah.
Could have been interesting. And carbon free on month, so we just ended up just not voting on it, we discussed a little, took a couple of.
Which thing? Okay.
Time to go into closed session.
No, we have another
We're gonna.
item.
Not much more though, not much more.
We were gonna.
Yeah, do we need this item?
We're gonna,
Is it fast?
we're gonna table 9.1.
Okay.
So
I just had one.
Reconvene.
okay, let's just reconvene.
Yes.
Okay, everybody, get tough,
Yeah.
power through this.
In the interest of time, we're
This was just taunting me that HWMA meetings are only 45 minutes long sometimes.
Okay, 9.1.
we're gonna skip 9.1 for the interest of this.
9.1.
I'm sensitive, so.
All right,
And then just on 10.1, I wanted to just let you know that we're working on a couple grant opportunities that are focused on solar storage and like specifically focused on resilience for critical facilities. So they're funding opportunities that are focused on climate change resilience. And so the one that's due next week, we're coordinating a bunch of rural fire departments to basically apply for getting them solar and storage systems. And then the second one will be more of a planning grant for like more complex projects like the Rotorville Airport microgrid possibility that was the MOU part of earlier approval. So just wanted to let you know that we're working on those things. I think that's it for now.
All right, any comments, questions from the board? We're at 10.1. Okay, nobody's, no public is in the room anymore, right? Oh, okay. Is anybody online?
We still have people online, but no hands raised.
Okay, so that takes care of 10.1. Future agenda items?
Yeah. I mean, this whole discussion and the fact that people are selling RECs like financial derivatives, I mean, it's mind boggling. And it just makes me think about, I think I brought up before, the need to fund our own projects. I mean, to be reliant on the free market, the invisible hand of the free market to provide energy, renewable energy, it's not working, obviously. We have to pay 6 to 9 times the rate of what essentially free, electrons. So I don't know if that's something we can look at, bonds, build our own, resource adequacy, our own RA projects, battery storage, our own solar. I just feel like that has to be thought about and considered so that we don't have to do this.
And one of the grants that there's a couple, the second grant, and then potentially there's also some IRA, Inflation Reduction Act related opportunities that may well end up being RCA owned and operated kind of systems like the airport microgrid, because the incentive structures changed a little bit. So it makes public agencies kind of more of a level playing field with, for-profit developers, because we can get a cash version instead of the tax credit, like a cash payment. And so I think, as I think I've said before, it's been a challenging time since we started up with the pandemic and some energy market disruptions and supply chain stuff. But the one solar project that's actually been built so far is the one that we did ourselves. So, I think adage that the private sector could do it better is not necessarily proving true. And so I think, not in every case, but so I think that's something for us to look at. I just got to poke that just to Richard reminding me that I was supposed to mention in my staff report that we posted, there's like a summer reliability outlook that we posted to our webpage that just talks about kind of like how are things looking for reliability in the summer up online now.
I want to wrap this part up because we have a pretty significant closed session. Go ahead, Nellie.
Oh, just as far as future agenda items, are we still on that? Okay.
Yeah, we're still on that part.
Okay. I have talked with our staff at the county a bit about this, and with other folks who might use either charging stations or hydrogen fueling stations in the region about syncing up some planning around those. And I know that our CEA staff are already doing a lot of work around that. So I was hoping to just get a report and kind of see where gaps are. I think our public works department was like, how do we pair up some of these facilities for public agency use, as well as, what's available to the general public. So just maybe another update about that. I don't know when the last time this board had an update on those efforts was. So if it was like right before I got on the board, then I understand that we might want to give it a little more time.
Yeah, sounds good.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So I would like us to move into closed session now. This is item 12.1, public employee performance evaluation pursuant to Government Code Section 54957B1, executive director. Say it again. Oh, public comment on this. Either nobody is in the room. How about online?
I will close it. Can you?
Thanks.
Not.
I was so efficient.
Sorry, what?
No hands raised.
Oh, okay.
Okay, I'm gonna mute the microphone.
Definitely.
Marathon.
Nothing to report. With that, we are adjourned.
And we're gonna adjourn.
Thank you. All right. And then what do I say, Laura? You did it. And then what? Good job. Okay, good job, everybody. Thank you.